Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, your host of Unlocked. You can't have a successful career without being able to handle the unexpected. And Unlocked is here to open possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you've got options from which to choose. Did you know that June is Effective Communication Month? To celebrate this, we're going to have a conversation on speaking our minds unapologetically. We'll finish today with a book that had impact on me and my life. Our topic today is speaking your mind unapologetically. Have you ever tried to explain a situation in straightforward language to be accused of being aggressive with your opinion? You thought you were being straightforward, but they thought you had been aggressive. Imagine the loss of knowledge and information when staff must constantly edit what they say. Imagine the time lost as a result of key information being ignored just because it was believed to be argumentative. What is the boundary between assertive and aggressive? Is it predictable? Can you learn how to speak your mind and know what you will be that you will be heard? Let me say that again. Can you learn how to speak your mind and know that you've been heard? Can you learn how to do this even when the situation is very dicey? When it is most important to speak your mind. We're going to be covering all of these questions with my wonderful guest, Ivna Curi. Welcome, Ivna.
Welcome, Dr. Madeline. I'm so excited to be here and I can't wait to talk about this topic. Great introduction, by the way. That is a very key question that a lot of people have.
Great. We're going to get into that, right? Let me introduce you to the audience a little bit more deeply. Ivna Curi is the host of the podcast. Okay, you ready for it? Speak Your Mind Unapologetically. She creates Speaking Up Corporate Cultures. Speaking Up Corporate Cultures. I love that. For developing openness, collaboration, and creativity. Her work is built on years of experience in corporations and through consulting. Today, she helps professionals speak up and be assertive while creating respectful cultures. I love how you have been marrying the speaking up with culture. That is so important because you have to feel that you're in an environment where you can do that. Let's not do any more introduction because I think they should be by now wanting to hear from you. So what was the point at which you said to yourself that you had to help others speak their minds?
That is a fantastic question. The number one skill I wish I had learned earlier in my life, when I really stopped to reflect on this, what was holding me back? It was a sort of communication. At the time, I didn't know it was a sort of communication. All I knew was that there was this thing. No one listened to me. No one took me seriously. I couldn't earn the respect from people, even though I worked really hard. I studied really hard. I tried to go to the best schools, do everything I was told and go above. But it wasn't leading me anywhere, and I was stuck. And specifically, this happened when this really became incredibly apparent for me personally, was when I got my first job as a manager, when I had my first team, which is something that I really wanted to do. And I got that at age 24. And suddenly my world started to fall apart because my team members didn't respect me. They would refuse to do the work that I asked them to do. My peers didn't want to listen to me in meetings. I was talked over. Nobody really stopped to acknowledge what I had said. The business partners that I often worked with, I worked in supply chain management. A lot of the people, the supply chain directors from other companies and our transporting companies, didn't even want to talk to me. They would ask for my boss and they refused to talk to me. So I had so many issues. I wasn't able to get anyone on my side. It was a disaster. And that was just the beginning. But then I realized later with other teams that my team members were having the same problem. And that was affecting me because I couldn't get my job done because my team members couldn't have these hard conversations with people in the organization who are often aggressive towards them. And I had to get them to talk to people who are 2-3 levels above them in seniority and ask them to give them data, give them explanations, because we had to work on this weekly and monthly report for the CEO. So we needed information, and these leaders were not giving it to them, and I couldn't be chasing everybody at the same time. It was not effective. So I had to teach them how to assert themselves and speak their minds. Even in meetings, I couldn't be in all meetings all the time. I needed my team members to be able to represent our team in meetings with 10, 20 people. And they couldn't do it, just like I couldn't. And that's when I realized, you know what, there's a lot of opportunity and need here. And then after tons of research that I saw just showed this problem with the silence in organizations, one of them being the study from MIT, done with a division at Microsoft. Microsoft, great company, really talented people, 6,000 people. They noticed that a third of people never spoke up about anything. Almost a third, 2/3 hardly ever spoke up, only spoke up about really mandatory things for their own needs. And it didn't really address the bigger issues in the company. So we have a serious speaking up issue. We're not being authentic. We're not being able to express ourselves. And it's affecting our productivity, our ability to get results, to grow our careers, to get what we want, to be appreciated, and to lead effectively. And that's why I realize here, there's an opportunity here, there's a need here, and this is not being taught in schools. This is not being taught by professors. This is not being taught by parents because parents don't know this skill that well. I wasn't taught this until my mentor, Mario Setti, in that job helped me discover the beauty of assertive communication, which we'll be talking about today. So that's how it happened for me. One of the things that I'd love to hear from you, Madeline, is, have you ever regretted speaking up and speaking your mind unapologetically?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question, too. Oh, yes. And it's funny because once I moved into a professional career, I have to say, it may have caused waves, it may have disrupted people, but I don't really regret it, especially if I was if the manager in charge would take a breath and say, okay, tell us more, Madeline. And then they'd get the reason why I said it. And then that sort of assuaged people's anger, and then they could move on. But you're right. If you're meeting someone who just thinks that any word out of your mouth practically is an attack on them because you have some agenda on your mind, it's very hard to make that communication get through. Yeah.
It's really hard, but I'm fascinated by your answer. You said you never regretted speaking up, even if it didn't turn out the way you expected. Have you ever regretted not speaking up?
Yes. Yes. Because I do know how to edit myself. It takes time and energy, but you learn how to edit yourself. I think that mostly I learned that when I joined groups and I recognized I knew the area that they were working in. So I felt that I could contribute immediately. And I learned that no, if you speak up too quickly, they push you away. If you sit and you listen for, sometimes it would take weeks, maybe months before they were ready to say, okay, you've paid your dues, now you can speak. So that was a learning in there that I had to do. Yeah.
You're perfecting how you spoke up, but you never really regretted speaking up, but you have regretted not speaking up, even though you had to perfect your speaking up skills in the process.
And I had to learn how to then prepare them, the listeners, to be able to hear what I had to say. Yeah. Even if it meant waiting.
Sometimes it's what it takes.
That's right. I often ask teenagers to give me questions when I'm getting ready for the show. And so this question comes from the teens. They said, is it possible to learn how to speak our minds safely in tense or unsafe situations?
Well, that's such a fantastic question from your teens. It's a really powerful question because the top fears that people have when it comes to speaking up and being assertive is the fear of coming across as aggressive, as difficult, as abrasive, if that kind of person that we don't want to be, confrontational and creating trouble, or, and it's associated with that one, of having negative consequences of backlash and retaliation if we speak up. And a third common reason why people feel scared and hesitant to speak their minds unapologetically is that they believe that if they speak up, nothing's going to happen. No one's going to take action. No one's going to listen to you. You're going through all this effort, taking all this risk, and people are going to ignore you and they're not going to do anything about it. And it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And that's hard, and that's a reality. And that's even more true if we're dealing with people of power. If we are women, if we are a minority of some sort, it makes those risks more real.
Yeah.
And that is why assertiveness is so important, because it's not just about speaking up. And we're going to get to that. I know we're going to get to that a little bit later today. But the answer to your question is yes. Yes, it is very much possible to speak our mind safely in an environment that feels tense, that feels like it's going to create conflict, that feels like it might lead to backlash, that's risky, that's uncertain, and most of all, that's psychologically unsafe, or at least feels that way.
I think then, to get to that, we ought to first describe the difference between assertive and aggressive.
It's a very critical point. It's the starting point whenever I teach assertiveness, because most people get this wrong, and assertiveness gets such a bad reputation. Now, Dr. Madeline.
Yes.
I want you to think about someone in your life that is very assertive, someone that you know well. What makes them assertive in your mind from what you've observed?
I see them speaking very forthrightly. I don't see them preparing themselves to speak. In other words, getting in position to speak. They just simply say, okay, Madeline, this is how it is, or whatever they have to say. So that, I think, is one real key for me to, it's both body language and that it comes, they simply speak.
And that comfort to be able to say what we need to say, even if it's a hard conversation, without thinking twice about it and knowing how to say it in a way that gets results, comes with practice, comes with understanding how these things work. For some people, it might come naturally, but for most people, it doesn't. And it's something that can be developed. Let me first explain very quickly what the difference is, and then let me tell you what then assertiveness is, so that is very clear what that distinction is. So an aggressive person is trying to control another individual. They're trying to dominate. Assertiveness, you're controlling your communication. You're controlling yourself more than you're controlling other people. You're not controlling other people. You're influencing other people, but you're not controlling them. When you're aggressive, you're attempting to control them with all these aggressive attacks, blaming, passive aggressiveness, vagueness, all these different tactics is to control the other individual to get them to do what you want in a way that's not very transparent, that's not respectful. Now, there are 5 parts to assertive communication. Okay, you mentioned one of them, which is the speaking up part. So speaking up is essential, is key. Speaking up is about expressing yourself, your needs, your wants, your rights, your boundaries, your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns. The second part is a skill. It's learnable. It's like riding a bicycle. You can develop it. The third part, and we talked about it with respect to being aggressive, where you're not very respectful. Assertiveness is always respectful. Respect is at the core ethos of assertive communication. You need to respect other individuals, and you need to respect yourself in the process. When we're passive, when we're people pleaser, we're often not respecting ourselves. When we're aggressive, we're not respecting other people. So respect here for others and for ourselves is key in assertiveness. And sometimes it's hard to achieve.
I want to interrupt you for just a moment, because that word respect is such an important word. I've done a lot of research on that. Asked people all different ages, all different cultures. It didn't matter what genders, etc. when I asked them, what happened when someone treated you with respect, they almost always said they listened to what I said and took it into account. They didn't have to agree with me, but they heard what I said.
They heard. They heard means they listened, active listening, they acknowledged, they validated, they were present. And that's part of assertive communication. So it's not a one-way thing. It's like, I'm going to spit out all my frustrations on you. It's just, that's not what it is. It's a two-way conversation where we're very thoughtful about the person that we're talking to, because if we aren't, our message won't be received. And that's the fourth part of the definition, which is it needs to be effective. You're influencing other people. You're not controlling them, you're influencing, because you're trying to alter their behavior in some way or respect, or at least have them listen, understand your perspective. And you can only do that when they're open and they're open to what you have to say. But we have a lot more control and power in how receptive people are to what we say than we think. And it's all about being assertive. So being able to influence is key. And that's the part that people are not thinking about when they speak up. And the fifth final part is calm. And calm is necessary because it helps you be grounded, be present in the moment, and actually interact with the person you're speaking. You need to be able to listen to them in order to know what to say next, because otherwise you're not effective. So you need to be calm, because when you're not calm, also your nonverbal language, if you're angry, you're saying nothing bad. You're super polite and respectful with your verbal language, but inside you're like, oh my gosh, I hate this person so much. I can't believe there's such a just terrible person. They're evil. I'm the victim. What is your nonverbal going to say? It's going to be very aggressive. So that is a huge problem as well. So calm is necessary. So there it is: skill, speaking up, calm, respectful, and effective.
Wow. I love that last one, calm. That it's an interior calm. Yeah. I remember listening to a talk on how to gain that. And they said you have to breathe through your belly. And I know we're not going to get into this necessarily, but I just thought it was so cool that the body knows that when you take the moment and think about breathing through your belly, it does calm you. So in those tense moments, I'm sorry, I interrupted your flow, but I think those are just amazing five characteristics. Now you were going to talk about aggressive. Were you, or is that it?
Yeah. So aggressive communication is where we unintentionally or intentionally threaten the other individual. And it could be through our verbal language. It could through our nonverbal language. It could be directly. It could be indirectly when we're trying to, or not trying to, but we're manipulating others because we're vague and we're trying to get something from them without being transparent, because we're trying to control them essentially. And so that's aggressive behavior. And often there are very subtle ways of being aggressive. We'll talk about a few of them as we go through this conversation. But it's important just to think, you know what, it's more about me. It's more about how I communicate. It's Communication Month. So let's focus on how I communicate. Let's do my part. Let's do it respectfully. Let's be calm. And then you're going to be 90% there.
I was going to ask you to give an example where you say the same thing assertively versus aggressively. Can you do that for us?
I can do that. And I can do that. And I'd love to do that as a little bit of a game.
Ooh, okay.
So this is a situation that comes up a lot when I talk to people in the workplace, leaders, or mid-management, director level, so on. So imagine someone consistently is failing to include you in an important meeting or important meetings that you really want to be called, you want to participate in, but they don't include you. And therefore you don't even know about the meeting. You miss the meeting. You're not there. You're not being able to contribute. How do you respond to that? What do you say? So I'm going to share a few options. And if you're okay with this game, Madeline, I'd love for you to tell me if it's assertive or aggressive.
Okay, I'm going to try.
And more importantly, here's the word perceived.
Okay.
If it's perceived, it can be perceived as assertive or aggressive.
Okay.
So the first one is I come to you as to try to deal with the situation, and I say, Why do you always forget to invite me to these important meetings?
I think I would qualify that as whining.
Whining.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Why is it whining? Why does it sound like whining?
Oh, because you're accusing me of doing something. Yes. And you feel bad about it. I'm sorry you feel bad about it. Get over it.
Get over. Love your response. Love your response. That's exactly it. This is going to be perceived as negative, aggressive, unproductive, even immature. And one of the key words in there's many things wrong with it, but one of them is a very clear way to distinguish what's wrong with it is the always. Why do you always forget? You don't always, nobody always anything. That's a very, very big generalization. And that generalization immediately sounds like an accusation. Fantastic. Next one.
All right.
You hurt my feelings because you didn't invite me to this meeting.
Actually, I found that to be very clear. And I liked the fact that you said it hurt me, because that's expressing yourself. So I would say that's assertive.
So that's a lot better. That is way more assertive than the first one, but it's not completely assertive just yet.
Yeah. You're a little weak there because you're saying, your feelings. But see, that doesn't bother me.
But it sounds more assertive. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The feelings is a good thing. Expressing the feelings, you said it, my feelings, I said my feelings, that's actually really good. Mm-hmm. So you hurt my feelings. The only problem with it is that you in the beginning, because you, again, can be seen as blame. You hurt my feelings. You are responsible for my feelings being hurt. You are at blame. You caused this. It's your problem, not mine.
Okay.
It's very subtle.
It is. Yeah. Good.
So here's a third scenario. Why are you being difficult by not inviting me to these meetings?
Oh, now that's really aggressive. Get out of my face.
Get out of my face. Get out of here. There's a huge assumption there around the other person's intention. Yeah. And again, it's just a big blame, right? Oh, why are you being difficult? It's like you're trying to be difficult. And you're probably not trying to be difficult. How about this one? Please stop ignoring me in these meetings.
Actually, I would consider that to be a good response to somebody.
It's a good response. It's short, it's clear. It still could be better.
Okay.
So if I ask you, Dr. Madeline, to not think about a purple elephant, you're probably going to picture a purple elephant because we tend to focus on the visual is there. The words say our purple elephant. The don't doesn't really get acknowledged that well. So the stop, don't do this, is not as effective as please do this. And so the assertive way of dealing with the situation would be something like, and it's a lot more wordy, but it's very effective. And this is using the very well-known Dezo script. Would be something like this. I noticed that you didn't invite me to this important meeting on Monday. Very specific, factual. When you don't invite me to these meetings, I feel very frustrated because it's really important for me to be in that meeting because I know I can add a lot of value. So next time, could you make sure that I'm invited to these meetings related to this topic? And that way, we can make sure that we are collaborating, we are avoiding double work, and that I can bring value to this session as well. Could you do that? Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.
That sounds like an email. And I think it would be a good email as an email. I would not find that as comfortable if they were speaking that to me.
Now, if they added before this and after this a little bit more warmth, not hesitation, but a little bit more warmth and approachability, but still conveying the same elements. Is it the formality that bothers you?
It was just in when I'm working with people, I really want them to say what they need to say. And I don't need all the background because I know them, or I should know them.
So it varies. So this is incorporating most of the elements of a sort of communication when you really want to have important conversation and make sure that people understand what's going on and eliminate as many assumptions as possible and being very clear and direct about your request.
You just said something very important. It would have been, I have to agree with you now. There were assumptions I was making about the person, whereas your last comment to me with all those explanations filled in or corrected possible misassumptions.
That is right. That's a key part. Asking great questions, like you talk about a lot, is one part of understanding and clarifying the assumptions. Another part is really expressing our perspective, our full perspective, and eliminate assumptions that people might have about us as well, which then clears the waters and lets the communication and understanding really flow. It sounds a bit wordy. Yeah, it could sound a little bit too formal. And in certain situations, not all of this might not be needed, but it's a safe structure to get your full point across.
You know, what that says to me, as I think about it, is that when you develop a relationship with someone, it is possible for you to be very direct and assertive simply because they know you and they know that extra work. You know what my skills are, where I have expertise, where I can really add value. You don't have to say those things because you already have established that. Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It really depends on the relationship. And I always talk about adding a lot of that know and trust factor, sprinkle it over time so that when you do have to have a sort of conversation, it's so much easier.
Let me ask you this. Now that I have a much better sense of how you define assertive and aggressive, where is assertiveness most important to us as career professionals?
It's crucial. It's crucial for us to grow our careers and manage our careers and do so in a way that still gives us work-life balance and positive relationships, be it asking for opportunities, for growth, for promotions, for asking for feedback. We need to ask for a lot of feedback, asking for advice and for mentors and for mentorship, being able to talk about the work we do. Self-promote is important as well to advance, but also communicate our boundaries, our limits, and being able to use something that Americans have a hard time doing, using all of their vacations. Right? It's something that we need to talk about and ask for. It's also important for self-advocacy and to stand up for ourselves and protect ourselves and handle difficult conversations and conflict and make sure that people understand how we want to be acknowledged and rewarded, because everybody has a different appreciation language as well. But it's also important for effective leadership when you're dealing with your team members in being able to set expectations, keep people accountable, give productive, positive, and negative feedback that people can understand and act on, expressing hard news in a way that's decisive and clear and positive. Not positive, the news is not positive, but in a way that allows people to know what to do next. And
you know what occurs to me as you're talking? One of the hardest things that frontline managers have to do is give feedback, give evaluations.
True.
And I've worked with so many of them who just didn't understand that their job really was to speak the truth to their staff member. And this aspect of calm, I go back to that word calm, you have to be able to deliver it calmly. This is not a personal attack on you. This is just simply expressing where you might need correction or improvement. I never thought about it in that perspective as the evaluation, but absolutely, that's where it's from.
It's very important. And again, a lot of leaders and managers are uncomfortable giving negative news. They don't even know how to do it. And it it just feels like they're doing something wrong or they're being a bad person in doing so. And often they become bad people, not bad people, but do bad things because they don't communicate, and then they take corrective action, then they fire, then they don't give the person the opportunity. And that's hurtful. But the calm, you're right, the calm, being able to express things calmly and knowing how to communicate things is super important.
Because those are situations where you may really dislike the individual. They may be your staff member, but you may
can't
not.
always choose.
No, you can't always choose. You may inherit. What are the first steps to making sure? I'm hearing some echoes from you, and I'm wondering if you could turn your volume, your mic down a bit. This is very unusual to hear the echo.
Do you still hear the echo?
I don't hear it when you speak. No, I'm not hearing it. No, I'm okay now.
Okay, so that's better.
Good. Thank you. What are the first steps for making sure that your language is being assertive and not aggressive? Let's face it, we have to learn how to do this. How do we edit what we're about to say?
So it's really important to be able to edit. And going back to the aggressiveness part, right? Because we want to make sure that we are not coming across as aggressive. So part of that is really understanding how to detox our language and our nonverbals from those aggressors. And there are tons of aggressors that happen even if we don't intentionally want to come across that way. The first one is assumptions. So assumptions are a big problem. We need to ask a lot of questions. Like you always talk about curiosity, understanding the other person, and clarify our side of the things as well. And we want to make sure that there aren't these heightened emotions on either side. We want to make sure that there is the calmest possible, not only from our side, but from the other side, to be able to ease the conversation. And it's important to understand how to be direct. And part of that is how to not come across as whiny or complaining, rather being very clear about what you want from the other person, what you want them to do differently, and being able to very clearly express that. And we can only clearly express that if we know what we want. It's a very different conversation. It's not assertive, just a complaint that we can do with our friends. When we have an important conversation, it's important to actually consider what we're trying to achieve. So those are some of the elements. Another thing that a lot of people do wrong is there's a lot of hesitation in what they say. And a lot of leaders, especially male leaders, don't like that. They want you to speak. They want to hear your ideas, your thoughts with conviction, without hesitation. So eliminating anything that can come across as hesitation really helps empower that message so that people will take you seriously and will listen to what you have to say.
I really like that piece of advice because oftentimes a person who, particularly an introvert, who doesn't speak, they don't think out loud like extroverts do. Certainly I can tell you from a manager's perspective, I really wanted to hear from those people. And so I would make room for them, and we would stop and let them be able to develop it in their mind, and then they would respond. But I think your points are well taken, because if you're an introvert, if you're shy, if you're very new to a situation, you are going to hesitate. And you have to remember that those things are perceived as weakness when they're not really weakness.
They're not weakness, but they're perceived in that way. And it's very important to differentiate being open and warm and kind and caring from coming across as hesitant, weak, not knowing what you're doing, lacking power, lacking authority, lacking conviction. Those are not the same. And most women in particular get that a little bit mixed up. They do things thinking that they're being warm and kind and receptive, but in reality, they're coming across as lacking authority and not knowing what they're saying.
That's actually, I've experienced that with working with many women. Yeah. Let me shift this subject just a little bit. How does this subject relate to bullying?
So have you been bullied in the past?
Oh, yes.
Why did people bully you?
They came from another culture that did not value women.
What culture?
I would prefer not to
All
expose
right.
that.
All right. So that could happen definitely. For me, I was bullied a lot as a kid, and initially it was one boy who would come and do a little joke, and I'd react and I'd shift my eyes to the side, and it was very uncomfortable, and he couldn't see that, and it fueled him to try new things until a point where he got a little those little screws, a nail, and put it on my chair so I could hurt myself. He did really evil things as a kid. And then he brought in his friends to do the same. Then there was this whole group of boys doing this. It started with me. Now, obviously, I'm not at fault, but my behavior attracted them and grew that bullying behavior. And that happens also as an adult, even at work, where we come across, like you said, as weak sometimes, and we don't have those boundaries and we don't speak up. And people think that we're pushovers, then the bullying tends to happen a lot more. And on the other hand, when we come across as aggressive, because we don't think about those things, we're not calm, we're pointing fingers at others, we're blaming, even if indirectly, then we come across as a bully. And that's another reason why it's so important to find assertiveness where you're able to express yourself fully and respectfully with others, but hold your ground.
As you were talking, I was thinking about some of the individuals who had been bullied. And like you, had an emotional response to go away because it was uncomfortable. When they took the time to think about what they needed to say, even to the point of writing it down so that the next time that person said that to you, to them, they would know what to say. They found that to be a helpful strategy. Do you think that's a helpful strategy?
Very helpful. In fact, for any important, hard conversation that I have, I never go into it without planning my talking points. I'm not scripting, but I'm thinking, what do I want? Mm-hmm. How am I going to start this conversation? What's the main point that I want to drive? How am I going to conclude the conversation? How am I going to walk away? Like those things I'm thinking about. And I recommend, especially if you're not like the friend that you said that was highly assertive, you're not at that point yet where it's automatic. It's crucial to think about it for a moment, because in the heat of the situation, it's very hard to think about what we say, and it's very easy to react with fight or flight mode, which are not helpful.
Yeah. One area, this is not necessarily a career area, but I take that back. It is a career area because motherhood is a career. There are times, and I certainly have found myself in this situation when my daughter was being attacked. Let me tell you, I was right in there defending her emotionally. That may not have been the best strategy, but I'm certain that I got my message across. And I'm thinking again about this scripting aspect, that if there's enormous emotion, if you went and stood up, you had time, if you had time to actually go away and think about what you wanted to say, then coming back to that calm business, you may not be completely calm, but at least you know what you're going to say, so you're a little bit calmer. I can see that as a real strategy. And of course, I see that as motherhood. I say that as a mother, because when your child is attacked, it really is very important that you get in there. But there are places in business where that happens as well. So
it happens a lot.
In your experience, because I know you teach at companies, How do men react to your teaching, to this aspect of assertive and aggressive?
Yeah, no, men react very well, especially the senior men, to what I teach. Now, I don't know if you've observed this. At least in my career, I've observed that men, most of them, tend to be slightly aggressive or assertive, but generally, on average, a lot more aggressive than women. And women, for good reasons, tend to be more cautious about speaking up because there is all the double bind, the likability issue, double bind as well. So it's riskier for them. And on the other hand, this whole idea of speaking with absolute conviction and being definitive and decisive, that's the part that I talk about that the men, the senior men, really love because they see that as more important than actually being right, than perfection, than having the right answers.
Interesting. Yeah.
So being able to speak in that way, exerting that conviction about what you're saying, even if you haven't done a PhD on it, is really important. And men are doing it all the time. But at the same time, if we fail and make a mistake, being able to quickly talk about it without feeling like we're bad, we deserve to be fired because of it. No, but talking about it with a certain level of conviction as well. Hey, I made this mistake, and here's what we learned, and here's how we can move forward.
Yeah.
That they really value.
Interesting. That really opens the door for a lot of people, and I'll just say people, but I'm thinking women, to know that if that's the desired response, then that should energize you to really prepare that response and get it right in there, clear, distinct, and make it happen. Really make it clear as you speak. Yeah, because if that's what they respond to that way, then that's going to really help you.
Yeah, it helps convey a message without going overboard into excessive detail and proving and slides and all of that stuff.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that perspective, but you're absolutely right. Oh my. All right. I have a lot of people in my audience who are in their 20s and 30s. So this is the time when you're building your career. What would you advise someone starting out or moving along early on, that they know how to be assertive without being interpreted as aggressive or passive? What would advice?
Number one, invest the time in learning the skill of assertive communication, because for me, it was the number one skill I wish I had learned earlier that would have made the biggest difference in being able to have a significant impact or greater impact in my work, and being able to get people to hear me out, getting buy-in from individuals, get the resources that you need to be successful. It all starts with being able to speak your mind, because if you don't speak for yourself, who will? You're the most qualified person to speak for yourself, as long as you know how to do it and you do it. So that's one thing. The second thing is to surround yourself with assertive individuals.
I love that.
Because you'll learn by osmosis. And as a people pleaser, originally, I did not do that. I was uncomfortable with assertive people. But being around passive people as a passive person is not helpful, does not help me develop that skill and that ability to speak up. I need to observe and learn. When I had that mentor, the most assertive man boss I've ever had, and I worked with him closely for 1.5 years, that's when I really learned the most about how to be assertive. Because not only will they teach by showing you how to be assertive, they will teach by forcing you to speak up. They will challenge you to speak up. They won't let you stay quiet.
I think those are two incredibly important pieces of advice. Take the time to learn and find somebody who is assertive and get them in your circle of support. Oh, That is fabulous. Now, I understand also, speaking of getting yours, that number one step, you give a free course, don't you? What's it called? Assertive and likable. I love it.
How to be both assertive and likable. It's a 10-day challenge, and it'll teach you 10 steps to achieve that and not have to worry about the backlash and being perceived as aggressive while you speak your mind unapologetically. And that can be found on my website.
Assertiveway.com. Excellent. Oh, Ivna, I have just so enjoyed this conversation. Wow. I've worked in this arena for a long time, and you really brought some nuances in that I just really appreciate. So I want to thank you for that. I wonder if you have any closing comments for our audience.
I do. First of all, always remember to speak your mind unapologetically, even if your voice shakes. This is a modified quote by Maggie Kahn, and I think it's a great quote because often we're scared and we don't feel like we can, but it's important to find the motivation and the good reason to actually speak up and really cultivate that why. And one of the things that I recommend to develop that practice and get really good at speaking your mind unapologetically, and that courage and the quality of what you say and how you communicate with people is by doing a 5-minute journal practice. I call it the Speak Your Mind journal daily ritual. For 5 minutes, sit down, journal about the hard or important conversations you had that day where you spoke your mind unapologetically, the date, who you spoke to, what did you say, what was your motivation to speak up, what were you trying to achieve, how did the person respond, how did you think they were, what were your fears going into the conversation, and then what kind of results did you have, what did you do well, and what could you have done better. And just by doing this, reflecting on it, you're going to build your speaking up courage, and in no time you're going to be a really effective assertive communicator.
Excellent advice. Ivna Curi. Curi. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madeline. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to be here on your show.
Thank you. What a great conversation. I really so enjoy how she pushes me in new directions. With those pieces of advice, I can't believe how I picked the book that I was going to talk about today, and it seems to be the perfect one. Remember, this is the end of the show. It's called Books of Impact. And the one I'm going to talk about today is Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. When I was fortunate enough to find myself in Florence, Italy, I had the great opportunity to actually visit the original statue called the David by Michelangelo. It was so remarkable that when I finally got in front of it, I could not move. I literally could not move. It was so moved me that for 45 minutes I just stood there and looked at it. I've thought about that a long time. And I said, what was it that caught me so strongly? And I decided that what Michelangelo was doing was not just revealing the statue in the marble, which is what he often said, but he had opened his heart so big that there were no impediments to what he did. So he was just flowing. And when I saw that, as a result, my heart was opened. It was a moment of pure vulnerability on the part of Michelangelo and on the part of me just seeing it. One of Brené Brown's lessons is that you build a resilience to shame because she wants you to learn how to be vulnerable. You build a resilience to shame by understanding it and saying it out loud. In her book, she talks about the fact that it's a great way to build resilience is to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable. Have you heard me say that a few times? She gives an example. Someone is saying, I'm ashamed that I wasn't there for my son when he was growing up. That's uncomfortable to say. But what Brené Brown says is by saying it, by speaking it, you begin to build a resilience for it. A manager should learn how to help staff see errors and to talk about that as a lessons learned activity. There should be no shame in that. Why we do that, I can't understand, but that's part of our culture. It should be, you did something that was wrong, you created a problem for us, now let's learn from that so that we don't have to do it again. But to do that, you have to first create an environment where shame is simply gone and curiosity is encouraged. That's why I loved what Ivna said about the calm. Get rid of all of the emotional part of it in you when you speak. So that if you're doing this on a consistent basis, and a whole group is doing this on a consistent basis, they're really able to speak the truth to one another. In fact, Ed Catmull, I think I talked about this in the book Creativity Inc. one week. That's what he wants. He wants people to get to where they can give their truthful candor. Get shame out of the environment. Your home, your team, your staff. This book is on my list of books of impact because it reinforced my understanding of shame and the power of using difficult moments to build our resilience. I also love that Eva also talked about uncomfortable moments and that you have to put yourself in those moments again and again. In my practices, I tell you every morning, decide the most important thing to do that day and do it. It's usually an uncomfortable place to be, to look at all of your priorities and say, okay, I've got to make a choice. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. You build the resilience. And I love that Eva brought that to the table, that yes, you just put yourself in that situation. And over time, you get more and more, not necessarily comfortable, but comfortable with it. Your resilience is higher. Wow. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. Eva certainly gave you some wonderful strategies. And I love the last two. Make yourself learn something. Learn about it. And secondly, find someone. And she says even a group of people who are assertive and get them in your circle. If you're curious about the background of this book, of this show, just check out my book, Unlocked, Discover How to Embrace the Unexpected. It's available on Kindle, audio, and paperback. And if you'd like to explore what it means to be resilient and build resilience and nurture it with me as your mentor, just email me at madeline@madelineblair.com. So what did you learn from today's show? What was it? Go into your social media. Write down what it is you learned and that you might do differently as a result. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. I'm Madeline Blair. And I'm wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.